Hey, good morning, and welcome to another weekly devotional here at Calvary Baptist Church. And I just want to thank you for joining us this week as we continue our study through the Beatitudes. If you remember from the past few weeks, we've been going through Matthew chapter 5, and each week unpacking one of the Beatitudes that Jesus gave to his disciples and also the people who were following as he taught. And so these Beatitudes, if you remember, I've talked about it for the past few weeks, are what Jesus described as what a believer's life should look like. If you are going to be a disciple of Jesus Christ, if you are going to have a relationship with Him, then this is what your life must look like for you to be able to follow Him. And so last week we talked about verse 5 where it said, "Bless those who are humble, for they will inherit the earth." And we talked about how that word humble means that we need to empty ourselves and we need to fully embrace the lordship of Jesus Christ and fully surrender to that lordship so that he can be Lord of our life and so that he can have control of our life. And then when we humble ourselves, we are saying that we are getting out of the way, that God's will be done, and we are going to be obedient to whatever he calls us to do. And so this week we're going to move on to verse 6, and it says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." Now, the first thing that we need to see in this verse is those two words, hunger and thirst. If you think about you yourself and humans in general or any living organism, as humans, we have to have water and we have to have food for our bodies to survive. And so when we hunger and thirst, it is a necessity. It's something that we desire that will sustain us, will sustain our life. And so Jesus here isn't talking about food, isn't talking about water. He's using this as an illustration. What he's saying here when he says to hunger and thirst after righteousness, he's saying that we need to have a desire. We need to have a thirst. We need to, that God's righteousness, it needs to be a necessity in our lives. That we need to desire the things that is truly going to sustain us and truly going to benefit us eternally. And that's what he says when he says is righteousness. And this righteousness means the righteousness of God or the things of God. And so Jesus is essentially saying here that you need to hunger and thirst and have a desire for the things of God. Those, for example, are a deeper relationship with Jesus, to be closer with Jesus, to have a closer personal walk with Jesus, closer today than what you were yesterday, to have godly wisdom, to understand God's plan for your life, to say, "God, I want your will to be done in my life, and I want to be obedient to that. So continue to show me what you have for my life." And then thirdly, an example of the righteousness of God would be the elimination of the sins and temptations that are in your life. Now, we all know that when we become saved, we don't become perfect, but it's that having that mindset of, "God, I don't want to sin. I don't want to sin anymore. I want to continue to grow closer to you, to put away the sins that are in my life and turn away from them and run towards you." And so as we continue on in the verse, it says, "For they will be filled." So what Jesus is saying here is that when you desire these things, when these are the things that are sustaining your life, then you will be filled. You will be satisfied. Because if you think about what is the opposite of being filled, it is empty, right? And so, or is being empty or being never satisfied. It's never enough. And so what Jesus is saying here, the opposite of the righteousness of God or the things of God are the things of the world. And so what Jesus is saying here is that if you desire the things of the world, like your money, your job, a relationship, possessions, sports, if those things are your identity, if that is what you think will sustain you and what you think that will satisfy you and bring you joy in your life, then Jesus is saying here is that you will never be satisfied, because those things cannot sustain you, because the only thing that can sustain you, the only thing that is eternal and that is completely satisfying is a relationship with Jesus Christ. If you remember from James chapter 4, Jesus is talking to the woman at the well, and after they having this long conversation, he tells her that everyone who drinks of this water will become thirsty again. But whoever drinks from the water that I will give him will never thirst again, ever. In fact, the water that I will give him will become a well of water springing up in him for eternal life. And so Jesus says right there in that statement that I am the one who satisfies. A relationship with me is the only thing that satisfies. Another place in the gospel, Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." And the only way to the Father is through me. So the only way to have eternal life, the only way to have to be in the presence of God for eternity is to have a relationship with Jesus. And so what does that mean for us? What is the application for us? That if we are continually, if our identity is our possessions, our money, our job, our relationships, then we will never be satisfied. The only way that we can totally be satisfied is to have a relationship with Jesus Christ. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't have money, we can't have possessions, and we can't have relationships. All of the things can be good and can be useful to glorify God. But what Jesus is saying here is that if that thing is your identity, if you think that that thing is going to sustain you, whatever it is in your life, you will never be satisfied and you will be disappointed at the end of your life. And so the only thing that's going to bring us true joy is to truly fill us up is a relationship with Jesus Christ. Thank you for joining me this week. I pray that you will examine your life and see that maybe the things that you are putting in that place that you think is a necessity. And I pray that you will realize that a relationship with Jesus Christ is the only way to be satisfied. Thank you.